But what Spielberg did was he put himself out of camera shot, but put himself into the water himself. Basically saying, I am so confident that everything will go okay,
Right.
that I'm here in the water too. So, heaven forbid something happens, I'm going to get it too, but I'm that confident. And it helped her get through it.
Oh, wow. So I didn't know that. I didn't know the history on that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating movie to look into.
And
So
then there's Dominic Dunn.
yeah, there is, and that was another one of those very unfortunate cases of a premature death. Wasn't she shot to death?
You're by her boyfriend.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I remember that, but yeah, she
Yeah.
was, and that's where these curses come from, the alleged curse.
Right.
So Craig T. Nelson, who went on to have a successful career in Coach.
Yeah, that's right. Coach did come after Poltergeist.
Yes. And he's still going strong. He hasn't killed him yet.
Yeah. And then there was that famous pot smoking scene there.
Oh yeah, that's strong parents
Yeah.
there smoking pot in
Yeah.
the bedroom.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an all around good movie.
Yeah, it goes to show that we've talked about it longer than we have any other film on this list
Yeah,
so
you're
far.
right. You're right. We have.
Yeah, so that goes to show just how good a movie Poltergeist was. But since that took care of my number 5 at the same time it took care of your number 5, we'll move on up to your number 4.
My number 4 was The Shining.
I knew this one would probably enter your list at some point in time, and we've discussed this movie before, not on film or radio or tape, but I'll have you talk about this film. It's something people probably know, but you can go into it a little bit anyway.
Well, right from the opening, you know, where they got the credits and the opening sequel where the mountains and the music, it had me from Hello.
Yes,
You know,
good way to put it.
Yeah, it grabbed me. What wasn't? What can you say? I mean, everything about the movie was scary, creepy. Jack Nicholson was phenomenal. Made the whole movie. I can't say enough. I don't know if the movie would have been as great as it was without Jack Nicholson.
Probably not. And for those who haven't seen it, the basic premise of it is that Jack Nicholson plays a writer who is struggling to have a book published, and he gets put in charge of taking care of an old hotel that's up in the mountains, secluded with his family, and they basically are going to be serving as house sitters for a while. And you find out that the hotel is haunted by some very powerful ghosts, but it's also alluded, since Jack's character is the only one who can see them, that it might be something wrong with him too. But he basically, the elements of the house, or maybe it's his alcoholism or whatnot, but something is making him more twisted and evil and abusive and violent and murderous throughout the course of the film. And his wife, Shelley Duvall, was it who?
Yeah, Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall,
Yeah.
and his son are the victims of this. But the son has a psychic power called, well, they call it the Shining. That's where the name comes from. And he tries to use that to help himself and get through this. But it's a terrifying film, and it was directed by Stanley Kubrick. And many people consider this to be one of the preeminent horror movies of all time.
Oh yeah, the isolation of being up there in the Colorado mountains and in the snowfall and nobody can get to you, and I mean it's just not a good place for your husband to go off the wall like that.
No, it's not. With the only hope possibly being the gardener and handyman coming to help you.
Yeah, definitely. It was, and that maze, and it just the maze, remember?
Yes, the hedge maze.
Yeah, it was real good.
Yeah, and it goes to show that Stephen King has now had 2 movies on this list, and we'll continue along with my number 4, which is the movie Arachnophobia.
Oh yeah, very good.
Yeah,
very
this movie stars Jeff Daniels as just an average guy with his family, and the entire plot of the movie is that there is an expedition to, I think, Brazil and the Amazon, where there's some people who are studying different species and whatnot, and they find a new species of spider that is incredibly, incredibly toxic and poisonous. And so it apparently also exsanguinates people, drains their blood, after it kills them with this very powerful venom. And it happens to come back in the casket of a man who died during the expedition after being bitten by the spider. and it gets loose into this rural town, and it crossbreeds with an average house spider, creating these arachnids that are incredibly dangerous. The movie has a degree of comedy to it, in large part because John Goodman plays an exterminator who's fantastic in this. But if you are afraid of spiders in any way, shape, or form, this film will terrify you to no end, because it really plays up the idea of these spiders being this just horrifying menace. You won't be able to go around spiders if you had any fear of them at all before seeing this film.
It's good. And remember, Jeff Daniels plays he plays a doctor, and he's trying to establish a practice.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and he's trying to prove himself all through the movie. And yeah, you're right. It's a really, really good movie.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's got some comedy elements to it. It tries to be lighthearted, but at the same time, it takes. I think what makes it so frightening is that it takes a common, everyday thing like spiders, which are a fear that a lot of people have anyway, and then it just magnifies it tenfold.
Well, I'll tell you the true story. When the first time we watched that movie, your dad and I were sitting in the living room watching that movie, and you kids were in bed and we're up watching it. And I mean, this true story, spider came down from the ceiling, and I flew off that chair. And your father laughed so hard, and I mean, you had to been there. True story, it really happened.
Well,
yeah.
Well, there you go. See, it puts you into that atmosphere and that mood where you really can't handle it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's a very strong film. It still holds up very well today too, and I easily recommend it above some of the other movies on this list because it's a very accessible movie to get into. Anybody can really enjoy it, and it's like I said, it's got that lighthearted element to it at the same time that it's pretty terrifying. Like the scene where popcorn or the spider gets into the popcorn of one of the people who are watching Wheel of Fortune and crawls out and gets him. So yeah, that one's right up there on the list.
Yes, it is. I'd forgotten about that one also.
Well, now you haven't. So
Yeah.
this will bring us now into the top 3. So we'll go with your number 3.
Well, my number 3 was The Exorcist.
I figured this would be on the list, especially because from people who are not of like my generation, from a generation before and even before that, this movie generally ranks very highly on the list of the most terrifying.
Well, to me, it was a terrifying movie. Of course, anything that deals with demons in any scenario is real spooky to me. I thought it was definitely still holds up today as a movie that I will not watch by myself.
The basic plot of the movie is, well, I'll let you cover that.
It's about a little girl that gets playing with a Ouija board, and she has this demon enter through the portal of her playing with the Ouija board, and she becomes possessed. And it's hard to think that there's anybody out there that hasn't seen this movie. But
or even if they haven't seen it, they've at least heard of it and are familiar with it.
Oh, absolutely. And
the girl's name, I think, was Regan?
Regan, yes, it was Regan. And, well, the famous bed scene in that movie.
Yeah, where they had to call on the
possession
priest.
takes over, and, yeah, it's just incredibly scary movie.
I think it's the Judeo-Christian demon Baal that takes over. Or is it Pazuzu? Might be Pazuzu. Either way, I have to brush up on my demonology at some point in time.
Yeah.
But it's for, again, going back to the discussion that we mentioned earlier with The Omen. Back then, when more religious elements were at play in everyday society, it was all the more terrifying then. And the things that it did with the effects and the language even, too, that was streaming from this possessed girl's mouth, it broke with social taboos and trends at the time. So by pushing boundaries like that, along with like the makeup and the effects, it did a great job at creating an atmosphere that terrified people to a point that they hadn't seen in theaters before.
Yeah, never seen. You're absolutely right. I'd never seen before. There was a part in that movie that was very controversial. Also, I mean, what she did with the cross was
Yeah, that's
yeah, that was very controversial. It just made it very believable that this girl was taken over by this demon, and come to find out, I guess that movie is actually based on a couple case histories.
yeah. That it's actually taken from a book, the name of which, The Exorcist. I can't remember the name of the author, but it was based off of case history of exorcisms and alleged tales of possessions. So there's if you actually for anybody watching this, not to plug somebody else, but I believe it's the YouTube channel hosted by Rob Dyke that has a special on possession cases that are really interesting. So I recommend that to anybody who's looking for a bit more into that subject, though it's depending on your beliefs and just how seriously you take the possibility. That's not necessarily a road I recommend walking down for the sake of your own fears.
Well, another thing, there was a lot of controversy about that movie that went against Linda Blair's mother, because I guess she was only 12 years old at the time that movie was made. And a lot of people questioned her parenting skills to allow her daughter to act in such a movie. So,
Well,
I mean, it was definitely groundbreaking.
Yeah, and it got her an Academy Award nomination, I believe, so she did something right.
Yeah, yeah.
And that'll move me to my number 3, which is by no means as terrifying as The Exorcist was for its generation, but I thought this was a scary movie in itself, and that's the movie Signs.
Oh, Mel Gibson.
Yes, Mel Gibson's in it, Joaquin Phoenix. It's directed by M. Night Shyamalan, the man who did The Sixth Sense, and it's an alien movie, and basically involves I'm trying to think of the word, but essentially a lapsed priest who's kind of given up on faith, played by Gibson, who is still the priest in a small, like, backwoods town that gets inundated with crop circles. And you find out that, these circles were actually done by aliens who are planning on invading, and they're coming out all over the world. And it's all about this alien threat. And there's some scenes in there that are absolutely terrifying. In particular, there's one where it's showing footage of a birthday party in Brazil where an alien walks out on camera, and the way that they do it and the way that they show it through like this camcorder footage is just brilliantly done for heightening the terror of it. Because normally when you see a creature in a horror movie, it's a letdown because the creature's never
Right.
as scary as what your fear leads it up to be. But based off of how they show this, the footage and whatnot, it's just really, really well done, because it's kind of like a blurry image where you can kind of see some of it, but it doesn't reveal too much of it, so it still has something left to your imagination, even though you see this figure. There's also a really terrifying and suspenseful scene where one of the other characters in the film says that they have an alien locked up in their closet. They were able to, like, close him in there. And Gibson's talking to him, and the guy says this, and he's like, I don't necessarily believe this, but he goes to the closet, and he hears something inside of it. And so Gibson's character wants to see, what's there. He's not going to open the door, so he takes a knife, because it has a reflective surface on it, and tries to use it to see the reflection underneath the closet door.
Yes, I do remember that part.
Yeah, and the way that they shoot that and the tension in that scene is absolutely amazing. So I love it for what it did. And I was tempted to put something like The Sixth Sense in here, but I didn't find The Sixth Sense to be that scary in terms of a horror movie.
Right, I didn't either. It was a good movie.
Yeah, it
but
was suspenseful.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. The word suspenseful. You mentioned something when you were talking about the Mel Gibson movie here, Signs. When you were saying that the creatures, were very, I mean, it didn't disappoint you any. And all I could think of when you said that was, you mean it wasn't like Langoliers?
Oh, God, no. The Langoliers, side topic tangent here. The Langoliers is a Stephen King movie, or a novel that got turned into a TV movie, where it's all about these group of people who somehow travel back in time through some temporal rift in the sky, and you find out that time is erased by these creatures that they nicknamed the Langoliers, that just basically eat and consume the past. and they're talked up as like you hear this terrifying sound on the horizon, and then when they expose themselves, they look like meatballs with like chainsaws for teeth.
Yeah. I mean, even their mixture between a meatball and a Pac-Man, right?
Yeah, they're absolutely terrible. It's
I forgot when you said that. All I could think of is you're right. It didn't disappoint like Langoliers did.
Oh God, no. Langoliers was terrible for that, and the idea of not showing like a creature fully until the end is largely attributed to Jaws, because the only time you actually see the shark in full is at the end of the movie. But Signs also has like a side story under it all about regaining faith, because Gibson's character is like, when the film starts out, he has no faith in God, but by the time it ends, he's able to put together like the idea that certain things happened for a reason, and that perhaps God was there the entire time. He just it wasn't necessarily evident to him, but at the end of the movie, he has regained his faith, and you see him putting back on his collar and heading out for Sunday Mass. So it's one of those different. It's a side story in it that is powerful if you look for it, and they don't try to beat you over the head with the religious message or anything. But it's a very sweet sentiment that's included in the film, and I really respect it for it.
It was a good movie. It was.
Not to mention, I find the whole concept of aliens and alien abduction to be scary anyway.
You believe in it?
I don't know if I believe that people have been abducted. I also don't know if I necessarily believe that there's actually been alien visits to Earth. I'd say it's possible, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's happened. I believe a lot of the UFO cases that we see are probably like experimental craft that militaries are working on and stuff and trying to push boundaries there. But I wouldn't say I disbelieve it. I wouldn't say I believe it either. I'd just say I'd leave it open to further evidence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to completely close it out. Or I'm not going to confirm it completely either.
It's possible.
Possible.
Life on other planets.
Oh, the idea of life on other planets, I don't discard that possibility at all. Because, in an entire universe, I wouldn't doubt that there's something out there. But whether it's visited Earth or not, I don't know. But that's just my take on it.
Yeah.
And that will bring us up to number 2.
Well, number 2. Now, I had a hard time with there were this number 2, because there was actually a couple that I thought, I went when you said to me, Mom, on your list, how you would do it is like if they were both on at the same time, which one would you watch? So it was really hard for me, because if both of these were on at the same time, I'd have to have 2 TVs going. So, but if I only had access to one, I guess it would be The Entity.
I'm not familiar with this one.
Absolutely petrifying.
This is your number 2, right?
This is my number 2. And it was supposedly based on a true story. And it has the whole plot of the movie, without giving it away, I'm not going to spoil it, is about this woman that is raped repeatedly by a demon in her house. And all through the movie, it was actually, I'm getting ahead of myself, actually it was the only case ever recorded where they actually had some kind of proof, captured this entity. They had made a replica of this woman's house, and they
paranormal
investigators, right? And the scientists were involved in it, and versus psychiatry, and they ruled out the woman wasn't nuts. But they set up a replica of her house inside this like school gymnasium, and they tried to. They had her bedroom exactly the way that it is in her bathroom, because she was attacked one time in her bathroom. Mm-hmm. And they actually used liquid nitrogen, and they were able to capture this entity inside of the liquid nitrogen. And to make, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to spoil the whole movie for you, but at the end, to this day, the attacks still happen, but they're not as frequent as they were. But it's definitely a horrifying movie, and that's another movie that I would not watch by myself.
the idea of a sexual assault or something like that by an entity dates back to European mythology with the idea of a demon called an incubus, which was supposedly a European folklore demon that would rape women in their sleep and was the antithesis to the female demon known as the succubus that would attack men in their sleep. Like I said, both extending from European Judeo-Christian folklore. So, the entity is, you could say part of it dates back to, 1800s Europe in the idea of people being attacked in their sleep and going from there. So it's something that is, whether you believe it or not, there's been people have reported something like that happening in the past. And like I said, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't speak for it myself, unfortunately. But knowing your recurring trend here of throwing demons onto the list, I can see where that makes it.
Yeah, there's this one scene in particular where her oldest son was 16, and he actually walked in, he heard his mother screaming, and he witnessed this, and he picked up a chair, and he's trying to hit this invisible thing, and ends up putting his mother in the hospital, and trying to protect her, trying to help her, and
he has shit aimed then, apparently.
Well, it moved.
Oh, okay, well, yeah.
I mean, how do you fight the invisible man, So, but yeah, it was definitely a scary movie.
My number 2 doesn't go into the realm of demonology at all. It's just kind of a straight-up slasher flick, and that's the John Carpenter classic Halloween.
Oh, Halloween, okay.
Yeah, with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yes.
And also Donald Pleasance playing Dr. Loomis. Basic premise, family has a kid, a little boy who's somehow just pure evil. And so after he attacks a family, they send him off, and he goes to this medical prison asylum, and this doctor tries to treat him and find out that he's pure evil, and then he escapes. And he goes back to try to kill off his family again, starting with his sister, and basically anybody he comes across. And the whole plot is the babysitter thing. Jamie Lee Curtis is playing a babysitter, and she's being stalked by this deranged killer who just so happens to be her younger brother. And what makes the movie so effective is, first of all, the very iconic soundtrack with that piano refrain, and also the subtlety of the film, too. Because even though it's a violent slasher flick, there's times where, if you look in the background of certain scenes, you can see Mike Myers stalking his prey, even though he doesn't make his presence known. Like, you can see him hidden away in certain shots, and that the idea of him successfully stalking and kind of alluding to the danger throughout the entire movie is a really clever way of doing things. And it doesn't go for gore so much as it does for the haunting presence and atmosphere of a serial killer. So that's why I've thrown this one at number 2, because I think it's incredibly effective for establishing that kind of violent motif without actually being violent a lot of the time.
You know what? You're right. I think I had forgotten how good that Halloween was, only because of the sequels.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's like, okay, I'd have to go back and watch that again, because I do remember it being terrifying. But I really forgot how terrifying it was because, of course, the sequels ruined it.
Yeah, it's one of the sad things about certain horror franchises. When something gets sequeled out to death, you sometimes forget the quality of the original, and you can easily make that argument about Halloween.
Yeah, just like Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that's another good one. As people forget that the original villain of Friday the 13th... Yeah, and people forget the original Friday the 13th villain was not Jason, it was Jason's mother.
Oh, I've forgotten that already.
See, look at that.
That's right, it was Jason's mother.
Yep, just pissed off that a bunch of teenagers were having sex and not watching her kid drown.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the number 1.
Oh, I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I know what your number one is.
I mean, there's no question about it, hands down. No question about it. It is Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. Movie directed by Roman Polanski. And I'll let you describe the basic premise of the film.
The basic premise of the film is that Mia Farrow plays the woman that ends up getting pregnant by I would say, a covenant of witches that happen to live in the same apartment building that she lives in.
She picked a terrible complex to live in.
Yes, and it was what was the guy's name there that played the leader of the coven?
I don't remember.
I wish I could think of his name. It's terrible to get old.
Don't say that.
Anyways, it's what really makes that movie is, to me, was that you never did get to see the baby, and when the baby is born, all that the movie refers to is its eyes, the eyes, and I think that made it so much more scary, because you could just imagine, your mind could do all these things of what this baby ended up looking like. And I mean, there was, all through the movie, it had you at the edge of your seat. I remember there was this one part where Mia Farrow was, as the baby's growing inside her, this devil, it literally is Satan that she's giving birth to. And there's a part where she's craving raw meat, and she just picks up this raw steak and starts eating it. And she gets a glimpse of herself, I believe it's out of the toaster, and she can see what she's doing, and it just repulses her. And it just, the great acting. It was brilliantly directed and written. It was just a Roman Polanski classic, and the best, hands down, horror movie of all time.
I think, was the actor Sidney Blackmer?
No. I'm trying to think of the...
I mean, I know Charles Grodin was in it, but...
No.
Well,
the older gentleman, he was, I can't think of his name
Ralph
now.
Bellamy?
Ralph Bellamy, thank you. Ralph Bellamy.
That's what I'm good for. I'm coming up with these things.
Ralph Bellamy. He was, he played the doctor, her
yes, he did.
obstetrician. And he was also in The Coven, and it was just, boy, what a movie.
Yeah, it's a classic for a reason. It's a movie that you really appreciate more than I do. But then again, that also goes back to your taste in the movies, like in horror, tying back to demonology and things like that. So it makes sense of why you would rank this as highly as you do, since as opposed to like The Exorcist, this one it's got that terrifying idea of something inside of you being like some sort of demonic entity. And for a mother, it's even more frightening when you have those motherly instincts, and the idea of, okay, well, you have something inside of you that's, very, it's a kind of fear that mostly only a woman could understand, because she can get pregnant and a man can, obviously. And to the idea that, first of all, you're pregnant with something that you didn't intend is horror enough in itself, knowing that you're carrying that burden. And then the idea that it could be something malevolent and taking control of you is horrifying.
And then knowing that after you've given birth, it is the devil, but the baby's crying and you are the baby's mother, and you've got a choice. Are you going to be a mother to that baby, and it's just, I won't give it away in case anybody hasn't seen it, but and then also her husband selling her out and basically sold the baby for a career. So it was just brilliantly written.
Yeah, if there was ever an argument for late-term abortion, I guess it's Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
But this is actually, it kind of ties into my number one in an odd way, the idea of having something inside of you like that. Because my number one horror film, I went with the movie Alien.
Alien, really?
Yeah.
Sigourney Weaver.
Sigourney Weaver. But it goes back to the idea of, well, for those of you who haven't seen Alien, it's a science fiction horror film that involves Sigourney Weaver playing a character known as Ellen Ripley, who's on a ship with other people. They're on I guess an excavation vessel, if you will. And an alien, unlike anything they've ever seen, gets on board the ship, and it's just hunting them down one by one. But it's got an acid-based blood that can eat through the hull of the ship, which would obviously be very bad for them. So trying to kill this thing is not only going to be tough based on the fact that it's such a huge, imposing physical force, But, if it bleeds all over the place and eats through the ship, they're all dead anyway because they'll be sucked out into space. So they're all being stalked by this thing. But the way that it reproduces is especially terrifying because it has an infant form that they call the face hugger, where it grabs onto a person's face and through the use of its tail and appendages implants eggs into a person that harvest inside of them and eventually come out and burst out of them. And there's a very famous scene where that happens to the character played by John Hurt. So it's like with Rosemary's Baby, the idea of having something inside of you that isn't intended, and then to know that they don't know what's growing inside of them, but then to find out that it is and it bursts through and consumes you, it's linked into like that kind of a Rosemary's Baby thing. And I guess the director Ridley Scott intended for it to be kind of that kind of a fear, because as Scott notes, a woman can be raped and impregnated, can't happen to a man, but in this story, essentially in a different way, a man can get raped and have something growing inside of him, and it establishes the kind of fear that men normally aren't able to comprehend because it can't happen to them, but in this movie, something very similar can and did happen.
So it kind of puts that fear into the man about him giving birth.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, kind of. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's a traditional pick for a horror film when people think of them, but it is a terrifying movie. It's so expertly done. It's very slow paced. It's not like the action based Aliens that came afterwards, but it's still a suspenseful movie, absolutely horrifying in many respects. And it's one of the better science fiction movies made, let alone being a science fiction horror hybrid.
Well, see, I gotta tell you, I've never seen it because I'm just not into alien movies. But I'd give it a try because I said that I'm not into alien movies, but I thought Signs was an excellent movie.
Yeah, well, it's more science fiction based than Signs is, since it's happening on board a spaceship, and for some people it's kind of a hard environment to wrap their head around. But if you take the time to appreciate the movie for the suspense and what it does with horror, it is a fantastic film.
She won an award for that, didn't she, Sigourney Weaver?
She actually has never won an Academy Award.
No.
I don't know if she's won anything else. She got nominated for Gorillas in the Mist.
That was a good movie.
Gorillas in the Mist?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. No,
I
have not.
Good. Very good. Diane Fossey story. There was one movie, though, I'm surprised it didn't make either one of our lists.
What's that?
That was Denzel Washington, Fallen.
I haven't... Wait. Is that the one with the devil and going from person to person?
John Goodman's in it? Yes.
Yeah, I didn't...
Yeah. Boy, I thought that was a good movie.
I didn't want to put that there. One that I almost put on the list, and I'm kind of upset that I didn't, but at the same time, I didn't necessarily consider it horror so much as I did suspense thriller, was Misery.
Misery was good.
Yeah.
Misery was good. More of a suspense thriller, though. You're right.
Yeah, and Kathy Bates was terrifying, and that whole breaking the ankle scene is phenomenal. So that almost made my list too.
Yeah, the hobbling.
Yeah, you could call it that.
Yeah. That's what she said. She hobbled him. Yeah.
Yeah, she certainly did. That scene is tough to watch even today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also kind of funny when you think that was directed by Rob Reiner, same guy who played Meathead on.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You did a good job.
He did a very good job.
Now that was a Stephen King movie that did hold up.
Yes, and the book holds up very well too. I'm surprised you didn't put Carrie on your list.
Carrie was good, but even as a teenager watching it, I wasn't really.
Wasn't scared by it?
Yeah, I wasn't scared by it. I tried to go with movies that actually I wouldn't want to watch by myself.
I gotcha. Then I guess the scariest thing in there is if you didn't, well, stay away from gymnasiums and buckets of pig's blood, I guess. That's the moral of that movie.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that'll wrap up our top 10 lists here for the top 10 horror films. Two different perspectives, two different takes on what's scary and what's not as frightening. But I want to take the time to thank my mother for being here on this episode.
Well, I enjoyed it very much and look forward to doing another one with you.
Yeah, as we come up with another topic, we'll hit that up. But for now, thank you very much for listening to this episode. Leave comments, please, on the Facebook channel. Head to the Critical Android YouTube, or actually you're already on the YouTube, presumably. So leave comments here, go to Facebook, put comments there. You can check out the Critical Android blog at criticalandroid.blogspot.com. Tell us what your favorite horror movies are. What did we miss, since there's so many of them? Did you not think one of the films on here was scary? Do you think there was something that was far scarier that should have been put up here? Let us know. That's what makes these things interesting, is discussing these, finding out what people like, finding out what we like, and sharing these ideas, and giving you something to terrify yourself on a lonely, stormy night.
And don't forget, I want you to check out The Nanny with Betty Davis.
Yes, check out The Nanny.
It's excellent, excellent movie.
Well, there you have it. My mother recommends The Nanny. I strongly recommend Arachnophobia, even though all these movies on the list come recommended. But if you're going to start somewhere, start with The Nanny and Arachnophobia and have yourself a time. Nothing says a good Saturday night like Betty Davis and spiders. But once again, thank you very much for listening. This is the Critical Android wishing you a great day and pleasant dreams of electric sheep.